All right, I am recording. We are ready to go. Can you all see my screen? If you could give me a thumbs up. Good, all right, great. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're gonna be talking about 3 essential elements for strong culture in times of change. And I know that this message has been repeated over and over again, that we are in a time of uncertainty and in a time of change. And what we wanted to do today is really double down on the cultural elements of what makes a strong culture during uncertain times. So we're going to walk you through 3 specific strategies in order to do that. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and do some checking in, and we're going to dive into this whole topic a little bit later. But if you could, in the next minute or so, go ahead and write your name, your role, and the district that you represent in the chat box, and then one word that you think of when you think of the word culture. And make sure when you are sharing in the chat, when it says to, you want the arrow next to that to say everybody in the meeting so everyone can see your responses. Would love to see who you are, where you're representing, and what do you think of when you see the word culture. Janelle, welcome. Kathy, welcome as well. Diversity, I like that. Shared traditions, yep. Fred, way of being. Culture is a way of being, I like that too. David from Lincoln Hall, community. Wonderful, welcome. If you haven't checked in already, go ahead and keep checking in with your name, your role, the district you represent, and what is one word you think of when you think of the word culture. We're going to keep going with the introductions so we can get down to the meat and potatoes of today. We'll start off by introducing ourselves. My name is Drew Shantz. I'm a design principal of Education Elements based out of our Bay Area office just south of San Francisco. It's a little rainy here today, not that California sunshine that I've come to know and love, but I'm really excited to be joining you all today and learning with you all and sharing what we know or what we have found works well in terms of developing culture, especially remotely in times of uncertainty. I'll turn it over to my colleague to introduce himself. Oh, I think
that's a good practice. Remember, remind yourself to unmute when it's your turn. Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Ballon. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and that's where I'm currently based. Also I'm a design principal with Education Elements. Also excited to learn together with everyone that's participating in this webinar today.
Great, thanks, Alan. Greg, do you want to do a quick intro? Are you good?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to welcome everybody and say thank you for joining us for this hour-long session, and just a real big thank you to Alan and Drew for their time today to share their expertise with us. It is really quite unusual times, and not just for New York, but nationwide. So we're just excited to have an opportunity to get outside of the 4 walls that we might have been sitting in for the last couple of weeks, and just be part of a larger community of educators as we share best practice. So I'm really excited about the session. I just want to thank you guys for for putting this on for us, and I just wanted to welcome you and encourage everybody else. If this is your first session, we hope you enjoy it, and if it's not, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And if you'd like to kind of peek ahead and see what we have in store, we provided the link for today's slide deck right there on the bottom of the screen. We're also going to share that at the very end, and as well as in a follow-up email. So don't feel like you need to take that down right away. That will be revealed again later. And if you don't take that down, you won't be able to, you'll be surprised as we reveal some secrets along the way. You won't have to look ahead, but wanted to provide that in case anyone has to hop off early. Then wanted to really quickly introduce Education Elements a little bit more. We're an education consultancy that ultimately helps schools and districts transform into places that teachers love to teach and students love to learn and leaders love to lead. We've got about 10 years of experience so far working with over 1,000 schools and districts across the country. And you can see a map here of where a lot of our district partners are. We have two offices, one where I am in the Bay Area, and then one in Washington, D.C. And we've got our team is kind of spread out throughout the country. So we've got touch points in all corners of these United States. And the way that we think about change and think about implementing new practices and introducing new initiatives in districts is through this responsive ecosystem which we've developed, which ranges from responsive classrooms to responsive tools. And you can see here kind of the work that we do in each of these respective areas to make schools, make classrooms, make leadership teams, and make teachers more responsive to the changing times that we face on a daily basis. I don't think anybody in the education space is necessarily new to this whole idea of change and uncertainty, because that happens to us every day, but we are certainly dealing with some uncertainties that we haven't dealt with before. And hopefully we can incorporate some of these responsive practices into the conversation that we have today around culture change and development. And then a couple more ground rules for you here. If you weren't here in the very beginning, make sure that you are on mute unless you're speaking. We'll have some opportunities for you to share and ask questions verbally if you'd like. You can keep your video on. That is enabled in this case. We'd love to see you, but if you don't want to keep your video on, that's fine. And then please feel free to use the chat function throughout our time together today so that you can ask us questions, and we'll also have a couple questions for you to answer along the way as well. And we'd love for you to participate that way. Here is a roadmap of our journey ahead for the next hour or so, or less than an hour at this point. We're right now in the middle of our whole group check-in and kind of an overview of the day. Then we're going to break the rest of our time up into 3 specific sections that relate to different parts of culture building. One is around self-management and how to create mindful moments for yourself. Another one is around relationship management. So how can we establish a sense of psychological safety in a time of uncertainty? And then one is around information management. So how can we create work structures that allow us to manage our time, tasks, and communication in an effective way? And at the very end, we'll have a whole group checkout and a summary of all the learning that we had throughout the hour today. So again, we'll hammer this point home. It's kind of like a dead horse at this point, like beating a dead horse at this point. But the times are a changing, and you all in New York have certainly seen that on the front lines. Here in California as well, we've certainly experienced some of this this crazy new times changing mentality, and it's been stressful for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around what do we do when we don't know what's next. And especially for us as educators, we're very used to being in person. We're very used to these interpersonal relationships that we develop with our students and with our colleagues. And a month ago, your work probably looked something like this, where you were interfacing directly with students. But now your work looks more like this, where you're interfacing with people on a screen in 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions. You're perhaps sitting at a desk for more hours of the day than you thought you would be doing. Or your work might look like this, where you are juggling the responsibilities of a parent, also the responsibilities of a professional. And we just want to name that this is a difficult time on many different levels. And hopefully today we can equip you with some tools to help get through that a little bit easier. And our theory of action, or essentially the question that we want to answer today, is how can we maintain a strong culture today when it's more important more than ever? And how can we recreate the feelings that were fostered in these environments like this when we're all together, when the reality looks more like this and we're operating more in isolation? And just to touch on these 3 main points again, we're going to talk about self-management, relationship management, and information management, and how each of those 3 respective buckets of thinking or management structures can help to form a really strong culture in this new remote reality. One more note before I turn it over to Alan to lead us through self-management. These are all going to be practices that are best developed in small chunks. And at Education Elements, we talk a lot about habit development and the fact that sustainable change really can't happen unless you have that small habit development or small ripple effect first before you get to that big ripple effect or that change state. the things that we're going to introduce to you today are hopefully bite-sized chunk enough so that you can make them actionable very quickly. But just another note to say that this is going to happen over time. It's not going to happen overnight. And we really rely on some of the thought leadership of James Clear. I don't know if you all are familiar with him, but he has this whole idea of atomic habits and the compound interest of self-improvement idea. So the only way that we're going to get better is by compounding that 1% improvement over and over again versus making a dramatic shift to the change state where we want to be. So I just encourage you to take all the information we share today and think about it in as small chunks as possible, because that's going to be the most manageable way to implement this change in your life and in your teams. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alan to talk through how to establish practices for mindful moments in this whole topic of self-management. Alan, take it away.
Thank you, Drew. So to start, just for this section, we really wanted to start with the self, to make sure that we're showing up at our best, to collaborate with our teams and to complete the work that we're tasked with. So I wanted to start with a practice that I've been slowly implementing in my life, and I realize it's a practice, really. It's not something that you get automatically, but meditation can help with, it can be an easy quick for establishing some mindful moments. So we're just gonna practice just 1 minute of meditation. I know that most of us are probably new to this, but for this practice, we're just going to close our eyes, kind of get comfortable in our seats, and focus on our breathing. Just a note around distractions. They will come up. Your mind will wander. You'll hear things. It's okay to be distracted, acknowledge it, and move on and refocus on your breathing. And again, after this is something that you can practice for longer periods of time to the point where you get comfortable. So we're gonna just practice diving in right now. If everyone could shut their eyes, I am going to set a timer for 1 minute, and we are starting now. So we're just focusing on our breathing and letting distractions go. All right, thank you for participating in that. So again, meditation can be something that's really quick to implement in your day. It can be 1 minute. And I think especially the part about distractions could be really helpful with dealing with the distractions as they come up in your day, practicing acknowledging distractions and moving on, getting back to your work. Hopefully that's one quick way to start building in meditation in your day. And it's really great for grounding yourself, centering yourself, and calming your mind. Thank you, Drew. So the main question that we want to ground this section is, how are you reducing stress and anxiety in your new working environment? So if you all could use the chat section to kind of put anything that comes to mind, things that you've been doing in the past couple of weeks to reduce your stress, to relax a little bit during your workday, in your new environment. What are some things that you've been doing? And we can take 2 minutes to jot down some ideas there. Let's kick it off.
Seen some good examples here already. Quick walks between meetings. That's great, especially as the sun keeps shining and the weather gets warmer. Thanks, Greg.
And and later on, as people continue to put down some ideas in the chat, later on we're going to talk about how we can build in some of these practices in your actual schedules. So I just saw one more. So taking the wellness and meditation professional development classes and going outside. Trying to find a silver lining, such as spending more time with family than you normally would in a normal work week. So that is all great. Thank you for jotting down some ideas. We're gonna move right along and just talk about really quickly just some work misconceptions that we may have had going into this new in this new environment. Sometimes I know that I had the idea that I would just sit down and eat cereal all day if I was working at home, but I realized that things get busy. Things can sometimes feel overwhelming. It can be a jam-packed day with calls and meetings, and also just trying to figure out your own work style, your own new work style in this new environment, right? So there can be different misconceptions, and we want to make sure that we give you some tools to not feel overwhelmed in this new environment. So I want to take a moment here to think about, to share this simple image that helps us think about how our needs can be categorized. So we're starting with just the basic needs, categorized under physiological. So food, water, warmth, rest. What do we need to simply live and survive? Security, under safety, security, and safety. So that could be physical, emotional, and so on. Belongingness and love needs, intimate relationships, friends, esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment. These fall under the psychological. Self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities, fall under the self-fulfillment. So what I'd like to do here, to using the chat feature again, is to jot down some ideas, and it doesn't have to be a lot. But the purpose of this is to have us start thinking about things that we are doing in our lives and how they fit into some of these different categories. So just jot down in the chat some things that you've been doing to reduce stress and where they might fall. So we can talk about some of them that came up already. So we saw a quick walk in between meetings. So this could be physiological exercise. Wellness and meditation. I think that could be, that might fall under safety. I think it could also fall under physiological. Trying to find the silver lining, such as spending more time with family. That is the belongingness and love. Yeah, so this kind of gives you an idea of how you can intentionally break apart some of the activities that you use throughout your day to relax and reduce stress into these different categories. I would like to share a tool that one of my mentors actually shared with me. If you could click into that link. Thank you. So this is a chart that my mentor shared with me to help me think about morning routines that I could establish to meet the different kinds of needs that I have. So she had nutritional, and the way this chart works, and what we wanted to share this template so that you all can take it and use it in your own days. Just some examples here. A level 1 might be filling your water bottle up, right? So if you accomplish that in your morning, you would put a 1. Let's say it's Monday morning, you'd put a 1 here. If you also ate breakfast, that means you got to level 2 and you'd put a 2. If you did all of these 3 things that you want to meet your nutritional needs, including the food journal, you would put a 3. And you do the same for the rest of these. This has been helpful for me because it's helped me to realize that there are little things that I could do in my mornings to help set me right for the rest of the day. And this isn't only a morning routine chart. There are other things that you could fit in throughout. So this is one resource that we wanted to leave with you all as you think about your own practices. Wanted to, as we shift towards thinking about relationship management, I want to make sure that the self-care, we don't have to put so much of an emphasis on the self, right? We can think of it as community care, collective care. There are things that we can do as a team to make sure that we're all showing up as our best selves. And some of the things that our company has done at Education Elements, we've done a few things as a team, as a community, to make sure that people feel taken care of, that people are being intentional about taking breaks to have fun and connect. So some things that we've done, we've had meditation meetings for 30 minutes, excuse me. Folks have organized runs, morning runs, group workouts, checking in, making sure that people are doing what they say they were going to do. So the accountability is huge there. Folks have also volunteered to work with the children of some of the folks in our organization. So setting a time aside for story time, science, and dance, so that parents kind of can get a little break, the kids kind of get a little bit of an energizer, and we're all kind of here in this time for the same reason. Also just checking in with your teammates. So you can complete a survey and distribute it to your team. You can also schedule just one-on-ones, informal, low level of stress or no level of stress, just checking in to see how people are doing. These might be people you're working with, people you don't often get a chance to work with. But it's really helpful to just set that time so that you can check in and kind of get level and see also how you can support each other as well. And lastly, just some takeaways here. Routines will help you get your mind ready, especially in the morning of the day, where you can think about your aspirations and your objectives. Remembering that we're multidimensional, and we sometimes need to really think about how to be intentional about meeting all of the different needs. It's not just physiological, it's not just emotional, it's a whole group of needs that need to be met. And also just remembering that there are people that are around you. I know that it's going to be virtual, but there are people that can support and check in and help you make sure that you're holding yourself accountable for taking care of yourself. I think this goes well right into our relationship management, because if you are showing up as your best and also finding ways to check in on your teammates, that helps to really set up the stage for establishing psychological safety, which is the focus of this next session here. So the main question here is, what are some things that you're actively doing to stay connected with colleagues and students during this time of remote teaching and learning? So real quick, just jot down some ideas and we'll shout out some things that folks are typing in. So it's just some things that you're using to stay connected to colleagues and students.
And again, just a quick plug, if you weren't with us in the beginning, make sure that when you're chatting that you're sending the message to everyone so we can see all of your ideas and your great responses.
So we're seeing morning coffee and conversation. We have creating a Google Doc for 3,800 students and all staff, marking when they connect. So using Zoom, platforms like Zoom, texting throughout the day, email, texting. So there are different ways for check-ins. Things like grabbing coffee together can be done virtually. Thank you for sharing some of those ideas. Just wanted to share this quote: psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So here, just driving the point that, again, you can show up as yourself, fully ready to work, ready to produce, ready to bond and connect, if that environment is conducive for that. So that's what we're going to try and zero in on today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say another point that I want to make sure that we're hammering home is that we want to make connections between the virtual world that we're living in right now and the physical world when we get back to those one-on-one in-person interactions. So hopefully you'll be able to take away some lessons or takeaways from each of these topics that we are sharing with you, and not only apply them directly to work today, but also work tomorrow or in a few tomorrows when we actually get back together. And I think as we expand on this topic of psychological safety, it's not something that folks think about a lot, at least in terms of their day-to-day work. It's usually about, getting things done. Psychological safety kind of falls by the wayside in a lot of situations, especially when it's high stress and there's a lot of things that we need to get done in a short amount of time, or there's a lot of uncertainty involved. And without psychological safety, without building that foundation of trust, you kind of get these characteristics of teammates and of colleagues. So nobody wants to look ignorant. And they avoid this by not asking questions. They don't want to seem like they don't know what's going on. They don't want to seem incompetent. So they might not necessarily admit weaknesses or mistakes. And they might not want to feel intrusive or negative. So they might not offer new ideas, or they might not challenge things that they might disagree with. So this is the environment that we want to avoid. We want to elevate this level of trust to make sure that the best work is getting done and we can become our best selves when we are doing that work. And in a high trust environment where psychological safety is strong, and again, psychological safety is this feeling that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with your ideas or questions or concerns, you see a lot more asking questions. You see a lot of self-admittance of mistakes or shortcomings. And that admittance is not punished, it is celebrated. It's a reflection of a learning organization and a place where people are free and welcome to be themselves and express themselves how they see fit. And it ultimately leads to a place where everyone feels more safe, more connected, and happier at the end of the day when they bring their full selves to work. If we look at a company that we all know and love and are relying a lot on these days, Google, they did a study a few years back, and they looked at the teams that they had created within the company and what made the best teams as successful as they could possibly be. And what they found is you could distill it down to 5 main things. And at the very top of that list, at the foundation of good team development, was psychological safety. So strong culture, whether we are in person or whether we are interfacing between screens, starts with this solid foundation of psychological safety. And to determine whether you are in a psychologically safe environment, you can ask the question, am I able to take risks on this team without feeling insecure or embarrassed? I want you to take a second to just think about when you're interacting with colleagues, and you don't have to necessarily share this with everybody, but take a second and just think about the last time you were working on a team. Did you feel like you could ask at any point, what is the goal of a certain project, without feeling like you are out of the loop? Or was there a time where you might have opted out of seeking clarification for something that you didn't know because you didn't want others to think that you were unaware or you missed the bus on something? So by establishing psychological safety, and this is very closely related to that Maslow's hierarchy that Alan shared earlier. Once we have this level of psychological safety, we can start to reach these higher levels of actualization as teams and as individuals. So we can ultimately make the highest impact that we possibly can, but it starts with this level of psychological safety. So now I want to turn it back over to you. And I want to know, with this could be a new concept, a new idea for you all, this notion of psychological safety. But I'm curious to know if there are some things that you're doing right now on the teams that you're on, or with the colleagues with whom you work, that establish a sense of psychological safety amongst yourselves. So what are some things that you are doing to promote psychological safety? whether that be demonstrating care for your team members as people, modeling and making and modeling, making and learning from mistakes, or checking in with others to establish that sense of community. So I want to get a sense for what's going on already and what kind of things you're doing to stay connected to those with whom you work. And this could be similar to the previous question we asked, but I want to know if there are some additional ideas about habits you can put into place to promote psychological safety. Yeah, acknowledging someone else's good idea is a great way to start. And we do this a couple of different ways as you all are putting some ideas in the chat. We do this a couple of different ways at Education Elements. For starters, we have weekly shout outs at all of our status meetings in 5 different categories that correspond to our company's core values. And that really allows us to show that care for team members as people and acknowledge the contributions that they've made to the team. And we're also very, very open about the times where we might fall short or where we might have not necessarily delivered the result that we wanted to deliver. And we might need some help from somebody else who has more expertise. So that vulnerability or willingness to share that I don't have all the answers, but I'm looking at the experts around me to help me out, that's a way that you can contribute to psychological safety. Thanks, Larry, for being more intentional about collaborating. Can't take for granted anymore since we aren't seeing each other in person. That's totally true. So what are some ways that we can foster that sense of collaboration even when we're not physically present with each other? So one strategy that we want to leave you with here is the whole idea of the check-in question. And I'm going to give you another plug for the rest of the slides in the deck. We've linked some resources into the speaker notes at the bottom of each of at the bottom of most of the slides. I'm going to put the link to the slide deck in the chat so everybody has that. And we'll share it again at the end. But just some additional blog posts, resources, and articles that you can dig into if you're particularly interested in one of the topics that we're sharing with you. So the whole idea of a check-in question is to really quickly establish that sense of psychological safety at the very beginning of a meeting. And these are just 5 examples of some simple check-in questions that you can incorporate in your meeting to give everybody a voice before you dive into the actual content of that meeting, and for you to also get a sense or a pulse of how the room is feeling at that given moment. And there's research that's been done, and I'm sure you've heard this as it pertains to the classroom, but if you speak up in the first 5-10 minutes of that class or of that session with a large group of people, you're more likely to participate as that class or that session goes on. So the check-in question gives everybody that opportunity to share their opinion, to vocalize their thoughts before the meeting actually starts. And these are just 5 examples. And again, we're sharing some resources at the bottom of the slides in the slide deck where you can see even more examples of check-in questions. We do this during every single meeting that we hold at Education Elements. And we did it with you all if you were here at the beginning of the webinar too, to just share one word that you think of when you hear the word culture. A great one, if you don't have a lot of time, is how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? Or I've seen red, yellow, green as well. Just have everybody indicate what color they're feeling. And that can give you a really quick sense of just where the energy in the room is and how people are feeling. Alan, did you have anything that you want to add around checking questions?
I like to keep it light. So today I actually had a check-in question that I like to ask questions that help me get a sense of more of the personality of the people I'm working with. So today I asked a question about what the first career folks on the call remember ever wanting as a child. So that kind of gives me an idea of other interests that they might have. So I like to keep it light and get
I love that.
Yep.
Yeah, you can get wild and crazy with these check-in questions, and it can be a great way to establish that sense of community when you are, I think, Larry, you had mentioned that this whole notion of collaboration is super important when we're not physically together. And this is a great way to continue building that community and learning new things about the teammates that you work with. So to round out this section, wanted to give this chart of the different ways that psychological safety can have benefits at different levels of the school organization. And I know that we have teachers on here, we have some folks who are working at the central office, at multiple different levels in the education ecosystem. So just wanted to share why psychological safety matters for each of you and for different types of roles in the school environment. So I'll give you a second just to read through that. But all of this to say that psychological safety is not something that is one person's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to incorporate into their practice, whether you are a teacher and you want to demonstrate care for students as people and notice what students are doing really well, up to a district leader where you might be supporting the career trajectory of those you lead, or ensuring that each person has equal talk time during meetings. So one thing that I want to make sure that you all take away is this whole notion of the check-in question as a really low lift, easy habit to develop as you think about how to continue establishing psychological safety, whether it's in the classroom or in the boardroom, and to keep psychological safety front of mind as you are interacting with folks in a digital and a physical setting. So does everyone feel empowered to bring their full selves to learn, to work, and to the relationships that you have with them? Any closing thoughts for this section, Alan, before we move on to information management?
No, I think that's good to go.
Cool. So we talked about self-management in those mindful moments. We talked about relationship management with the sense of establishing psychological safety. Now we want to talk about information management. So how might we best manage our time, our tasks, and our communication with others in a more virtual and remote world? And you all know this game well. We want your opinions. We want your thoughts again in the chat box. And we'd love you to answer this question. So what are some of the challenges you're facing right now when it comes to managing information and actually getting the work done that you need to get done? And I'll share one that as you all are putting that in the chat box, one that I've kind of struggled with and getting better at is kind of triaging information and there's been a lot of information coming through all of our communication channels with the many dozens of districts that we work with. And being able to synthesize that information has been challenging for me. Alan, I don't know if you want to speak to this as well, but I've found that just kind of keeping all that information organized is really tough. So I've been reaching out to some colleagues to help me work through some of that information synthesis. Yeah, Greg, turning it off at the end of the day, totally. I'm hearing from a bunch of teachers and district leaders that there's kind of a balance to strike between doing a lot because you have all this time and there really is no separation of work and life anymore. You're kind of all in on work and all in on life at the same time. So when do you close the laptop and shut down for the day? Yeah. Keeping the wheels in motion, working at a distance. Yep. Thanks, Larry. Janelle, working while my own kids are at home. Totally. I don't have kids of my own, but we have many colleagues who are juggling that exact thing. And it's tough. You're not only, in a teacher sense, you're not only responsible for the students that you are used to teaching on a daily basis, but you're also responsible for the students who are at home with you. So certainly a challenge to name as we navigate this situation where the lines between work and home are blurring a little bit. So to start off with time management really quickly, I want to introduce you to a technique that I've been using for a long time, ever since undergrad, actually, when I was writing papers, having to kind of hunker down and do a lot of deep work in long extended periods of time. And that's called the Pomodoro technique. And it's helpful for some, it's not helpful for others, but I want to introduce this to you as not a prescriptive way, but a customizable way for you to manage your time, especially when you don't have a lot of structure around you. So if you're used to having a schedule and you're going, hour by hour, you know exactly what you have to do, and now you're in this space where you have the whole day to work, this could be a solution for you. So essentially what you do is set a timer for 25 minutes, do some deep work during that time with absolutely no interruptions, then take a 5-minute break. And it's very important during that 5-minute break that you don't do any sneaky working in that time. You repeat that process for 4 times total, and then you take a longer break, 15 or 30 minutes, whatever you need. But and you can customize this. Like I said, if you can only do 20 minutes of focus work because you've got a little one who's off in the corner and needs some more attention, customize it. Break that down to 20 minutes or 15 minutes. But just a way to think about how to structure time to get work done, especially when there's not a lot of structure around us in many cases. And there's an article linked here. Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, was a real game changer for me when I started to think about how to distinguish my work between shallow and deep work. And I won't go into that right now, but a great resource to click into if you are interested in looking at that in a little bit more depth. So now I want to go over from managing our time to managing our tasks. And you might have a stack of papers a mile high that you have to sort through. You might have a bunch of different projects that are kind of circling around in your head, and you might not necessarily know how to get started on those things when you don't have your team physically proximate with you and helping you sort through those things. So the technique I want to share with you is called the Kanban method, or the Kanban board. And I hope some of you are familiar with this already and are implementing it as we speak. But if you're not, this is a great way to visualize your work and to see what's actually getting done and focus on the flow of that work. And it's really simple to get started with a Kanban. You can do this with sticky notes. You can do it digitally on a platform called Trello, which I'll introduce in a second. But you basically split up a piece of paper or a whiteboard or a part of your wall into 3 sections: to do, doing, and done. And for each idea or each task that you have to do, take out a sticky note and just stick that up in each of those respective columns. At the beginning of the day, you might have a lot in the to-do column, but as you progress through the day and you can see yourself moving from to do to doing to done, it's a great visual representation of how that work is flowing along. And it could be a good way to communicate what you're doing with the other folks who are in your house. So if they see that you have your Kanban board up and you have a lot of tasks in the to-do column, maybe your child knows that it's not time to talk to mom or dad right now because there's a lot in that column. But once more starts moving over to the done column, that could be a time to interrupt their work a little bit more. And there are other ways to organize this Kanban method. And a great way to do that is with a digital platform that's all free. And we use a lot at Education Elements, called Trello. And it looks like some people in the chat are reacting to this. So using some marker boards in a similar fashion at home, I love to see that. Trello, there's a link in the slide deck as well, so you'll be able to access that afterwards. But there are a lot of really great customizable boards and card manipulations that you can use on this platform that aren't necessarily restricted to managing tasks. You can manage whole team projects. You can facilitate meetings. We do that on a weekly basis where our agenda is the Trello board and we move cards from column to column based on when we get things done. This can also be a great way to facilitate project-based learning or virtual learning as a whole. So you could create learner playlists on this platform. You could just house resources for students to get tasks done on their own. It's really integratable, very easily integrated with a number of other digital platforms like Google Docs. So you can attach documents on here, connects really well to email. But if you're not familiar with Trello, great way to start managing your tasks, and then also managing some bigger projects if that's something that you're working on as well. And the last thing I'll share with you here is on managing communication. So now that we have time and tasks out of the way, we have to figure out a good structure for communicating with others on our team, with others with whom we work. And a lot of the times we are very focused on listening and sharing, going back and forth between listen, share, listen, share. And that's a good way to think about communication, but I think there's also a value in taking time to reflect and respond before that in between when that listening and sharing happens. And the whole idea that we're trying to get at here is to not necessarily treat communication and sharing information as an event, a one and done, that it's a process and something that continues on and on, especially, again, when we're apart and we don't have that physical reminder of someone acknowledging the information that we've shared with them. We have to treat communication more like a process than an event. And as communicators, we have different roles to play, both as providers and as receivers. So when we are sharing information with others, we have to make sure that we're thinking about the best ways that that information is going to be received. And as receivers, we have to pay attention to what the sender of that information is saying or sharing, and having the ability to advocate for ourselves and ask for more clarity if that's something that we need. And that falls very, very closely into this whole responsive communication cycle, which is modeled after the iterative design cycle. So there's that time of reflection that interplays in with the time to listen and a time to share. And balancing those three things is super important when we're working both remotely and in person. Here's a quick example of how this might look in different roles. Similar to that other chart that we shared in the relationship management section, sharing information can look different for different, in different roles. And what you'll notice here is that we have different interactions here on the left-hand side. And then what you might say as a teacher, for example, in this column, what that stakeholder might say in the middle column, and what you can say as a reflect and respond response to that particular communication thread. So let's take the parent example for one. You as a teacher might share out with parents and say that you'd like to spend some more time with each of those parents over Zoom to discuss child's progress during this time of distance learning. Great, sounds good, very well intentioned. But a parent might say to you, I have 3 kids, all with different video conferencing schedules. I don't want to take over computer time when they could be learning. Very valid concern, and something that we're all probably facing as well, juggling all these different schedules. So that reflect and respond response could sound something like this. So could we hop on the phone instead? I'd love to just grab 15 minutes of your time whenever is most convenient for you. And you'll notice in the reflect and respond column, all of them incorporate some questions. So you don't want that to, again, you don't want to view communication as an event. You want to view it as a process. So thinking about questions that can lead to further iterations of that conversation is really important in that reflect and respond phase. And again, I just want to hammer home the fact that we are not thinking about these topics in isolation in this virtual world. We're also thinking about what are the ramifications and implications that we can bring back to the in-person interactions that we have once our distance working and learning is over. So related to the Pomodoro technique, taking away this lesson that we should be intentional with time and be respectful of the time that we have with our colleagues, our students, and our coworkers. Also to focus on the flow and getting things done is related to the whole idea of the Kanban board. So when you can visually manage and keep track of how projects are happening and how tasks are being done, it's a great way to communicate with others to show them what exactly is being done. And speaking of communication, we should be viewing that as a process, not an event. Regardless of whether we're behind the screen or sitting next to each other at a table or across from each other at a table, communication should be a process and something that's ongoing and iterative to make sure that both the sender and the receiver of that information are getting their needs met. So just to summarize real quick, we went through 3 major topics here, 3 buckets of management techniques that can contribute to a positive culture. Self-management, where Alan took us through some mindful moments. Relationship management, where we talked about how we can establish a sense of psychological safety to increase a positive culture in our teams. And then also information management. So how can we manage our tasks, our time, and our communications to play into a more positive culture, both remotely and in person. Alan, do you want to take us home here?
We are going to practice a checkout. So what is one thing that you're going to take away from this webinar? It might be something that you'll keep in mind, something that you'll want to implement. What's one takeaway for you in this webinar. You can use the chat section for this.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
And you could also think about a tool that we've shared or a platform that we've shared that you might think is helpful as well. You can jot down any thoughts on that as well. Okay. So as people jot down ideas, wanted to also, again, just share that the link is in these slides as well as in the chat. It might be easy to fit it on this slide here. You can always contact us if you have any questions about any of the materials here. Open to support, answer any questions that you might have. And also, just wanted to share some resources that our company as a whole is making available to educators, trying to figure out what's the best way to transition to this virtual work. So you can find this at the link at the bottom at elements.com/COVID-19 office hours. Those are for office hours, but we also make available webinars, coffee chats, one-pagers on different things. Bunch of resources available through our company. So we definitely encourage you to look those up.
And it's all free.
All free.
Yep.
All right. Well, we want to thank you. Do you want to comment on this slide, Drew?
Oh yeah, just one more way to stay connected here. We have a Facebook group for educators called Lifted, which stands for Leadership Insights for Transforming Education. If you're looking for that sense of connection with educators who are outside of your district or outside of your state even, this is a great way for you to share some information and get ideas from others. So go ahead and look us up on Facebook as well. Great way to maintain that sense of community.
Yeah, so thank you all. We hope that this was informative for you all. We hope that you can take at least one thing to implement and helps to build your culture for your teams. So thank you all for participating. Greg, was there anything that you wanted to close out with?
Yeah, Alan, Drew, thank you. I think the resources that you provided and the perspective is super important and very timely. Thank you for just sharing your insights and expertise. I am going to ask anybody who's participated for the session here, I'm going to throw a link to a feedback survey into the chat bar here. And if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of information so that we can share that with Alan and Drew, and we can continue to make these 1-hour sessions as meaningful as possible. We'd really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, we'd love to
That's
hear
all
you.
I got, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, go ahead and stop sharing here. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Hope everyone has a great week, and hopefully we'll see you again real soon.
All right, take care.